What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today's conversation is with Matthew Tack. Matt is an entrepreneur and host of the Full Fuel podcast, where they are the champions of the forever athlete. That means you at your very best forever. If you don't believe you have the capabilities to reach your highest physical potential every day of your life moving forward, you can, and you will if you just start putting effort into it. And that's what this conversation really boils down to, is how you can start today to put effort into your life, no matter if you're an entrepreneur, no matter if you have 3 children, both of which Matthew is, both an entrepreneur and a parent with 3 kids. And he's been able to structure his life in such a way that he continues to get better as an athlete. Not that he is literally an athlete, but I believe and they believe that we're all athletes. We all have it within us to be more athletic, more capable, and highly functional human beings throughout our whole life. And you have the capability to do that as well. So prepare for this potentially life changing conversation as you come up with, as we talk about tactics and strategies that you can implement into your life. Apparently, my words are just all over the place today. Into your life to make more physical changes, become a better person, become a better version of yourself, and become physically resilient throughout your life. Enjoyed this conversation with Matthew Tack. Matt, great to have you on the show, brother. You got your hands in a lot of pots, but I'd like to start at the beginning of your journey. I was reading your profile, and it sounds like you made a change in your mid 20s that that changed the trajectory of your life. Maybe you had a couple of changes that
Mhm.
that you've had over your lifetime. I know I have. Uh, I'm curious to see what that first change looked like. It sounded like you had a come to Jesus moment, maybe with your your younger self. So, tell me about your early life and what your how that change started to come about.
Yeah, that's a massive question and so important because so many people I was talking about this is like the journey is the destination, and my mind still wants to go. Just give me the destination, give me the destination. But it was really in my mid 20s. I really excelled at athletics. I was a really good basketball player. I still promote myself as a pretty darn good basketball player because I keep myself in excellent shape. But it was one of those things where I kind of let that go, and I got into this really like sulky, sullen state with a really bad attitude. And it was really just like taking the next day as if it wasn't a prize. And I just constantly had this like negative attitude. I even had a negative attitude towards my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife.
Mm.
And just this perpetual day after day. And what I realized was like, those negative thoughts compound just like a positive thought. And so I had this like come to Jesus moment when I'm like, man, do I want to live this life? Is like, do I want to live in a constant like negative state where I just feel overwhelmed and like I have to bear the burden every day? And I do reflect on this like very often because I made one decision, and that was one decision was to like just all right, I just need to get it out. And I'm a big believer in like therapists and just like understanding, just like to get it out and vocalize it. And you could be your own therapist, I guess, sometimes too. But it was in my mid 20s where I went into the Celebrate Recovery program at a church. And I was like, got it. Like, if you have something for me, I like want to figure it out. And really, I have to be like brutally honest with you. I had a sexual addiction. I was just like lust all the time. And what that holds on a man is like I didn't realize at the time, but like that was holding like this really like demonic force over me that like I feel like I couldn't break. And so I went into this Celebrate Recovery program thinking like I got to get out of this mental state. And so when I went into it, it was like a 90-day program. I literally was thinking this is for drug addicts. This isn't for me. But I gave it a shot. And that one time I read this Celebrate Recovery Bible. It was the first time I read a Bible in like really my entire life, like cover to cover. But they had these stories in it of these people like drug addicts, whatever it was, they had a story. And I'm like, man, these people have a story. I have a story too. And I felt like God gave me this one thing on the outset of that. And it was to be an encourager, just to like every day encourage people. But it started with my wife. So I got married at 26. And it pains my wife to even hear this, but I legitimately wasn't ready to marry her that day. When I got married to her, like she shouldn't have married that man. And she did anyway. And she like believed in me and she still believes in me today. And, 12 years later, we just live an abundant marriage. But it was that one action that I took of like, I don't want to live this way. And there's got to be something that I can do about it. And so I went in the Celebrate Recovery program and I was like, look, I'm just open minded. And so on the outset of that, it was like one action every day. And that was to wake up just to encourage my wife. That was the one controllable that I had because like we were living under the same roof. And so I started doing that. I started like just being like, hey, babe, love you. Whether I believed it or not, it was just one of those things where I just had to I had to compound that positive thought. And to be honest with you, though, that was like the breaking point of which my brain literally, like things started opening up. I started reading more books. I started doing these things that were empowering my number one, my brain, just to think a little bit differently and look at the world a little bit differently and be a little bit more curious every day. And that ultimately has led me to my entrepreneurship path as well. So people want to overcomplicate it, but man, I wouldn't take that away because of the journey that took me on as far as narrating my story to ultimately the life I now get to live and with my wife and my three girls.
Yeah, most people don't appreciate the fact that your thoughts are just a loop, just like anything else. It's just a compounding habit, just like trying to change your nutrition, just trying to exercise, like, trying to change any other habit that you're trying to change in your life. Your thoughts are the same. So you have a negative thought that goes to another negative loop, that goes to another negative loop, and then that loop just continues. And the more often you do it, the stronger that connection gets, the harder it is to break. So as soon as you start, I love how you said, I just wanted to do one nice thing every day for my wife, or say why not one nice thing to my wife, because all you were doing was trying to break the loop just one time. All you were trying to do is move your thoughts to a positive direction, just one small nudge at a time. And when you compound that one day after to the next day to the next day, then it'll start to affect other parts of your life, and you'll start to read books or start to find other ways to kind of expand your thoughts.
That's 100% it. It just like those thoughts compound, whether you're choosing, and it's a choice too at the end of the day. Like you get to choose whether you want, and I always think of it like this too. Like no one would ever say, I want the outcome to be bad, right? And so like when you perceive that outcome, that's why I believe in the power of visual manifestations is because like you're not perceiving that to be bad. So you have to control the thoughts that come into your mind and out of your mouth. And the best way to do that, I just love like reading empowering books, how I can lead podcasts, all these things that can lead in the direction of where I want things to go. So, but negative thoughts happen in that same direction and they compound the same way.
So I'll tell you my story, which is very similar actually. I played college football, and when I got out of college, I got out a little late. I took my time getting through college, which is fine. I'm not a doctor, just decided to go a little slow. I was probably 23 maybe when I graduated, and played college football, got finished, spent my life from 7th grade pretty much through 23 years old playing football. So I got done, and I guess at the time I felt like my a part of me was gone, right? Suddenly football was not a part of my life. I wasn't an athlete anymore. I was still in the gym. I've lifted weights from like since I was 13 years old. I've been in the gym. I've probably been out of the gym for longer than a week, maybe one time in my life since then. So I still had that. I still had that as a building block for me. But once I got out of football, I kind of fell into this funk. And now that I look back on it, I know that I was essentially depressed for about a 9 to 12 month period of time, because like I said, I kind of started that negative loop where I felt like I didn't have a purpose, or the thing that I was doing most of my life was gone now. So it took and I remember the day. It took me like literally stepping on the scale because I was like, I'm lifting weights and so on and so forth. And I had this depression going on, and I convinced myself that I was trying to bulk up and put on some weight. So I kind of like let myself eat whatever I wanted. And I wasn't around people all that much outside of being at the gym. And I remember stepping on the scale and I was 240, and I was like, what the hell did I do? And my mind just like clicked, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I've been doing the last year, but it's time for me to wake up and do something. So like from that point on, it wasn't like a sequence immediately, but like I started reading as well. I started looking for dates like during that year period of time. I went around anybody. I didn't look for any dates. I didn't try and do anything. But I definitely had a moment where I started to shift my mind toward more purposeful and positive thoughts. So I can resonate with what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, that those epiphany moments, it didn't happen for me, but I love the idea of like there's got to be the trigger points. There's always the trigger points in everyone, but then what is the commitment to action on the backside of that? So I love that story because then there's like action on the backside of it.
So now you're like head deep in health and fitness. Was that a part of your life as you were going through that transition? Was that a part of your life? Did you feel yourself kind of like gravitate toward that more once you started to, make these changes in your life?
So yeah, it was. It was a big piece. So when I was 25, I actually moved to Washington D.C. And I was there, and I actually got my NASM certification. And so what I did was I was working for a Fortune 50 company, but in the mornings, what was really cool is I got into the sport and health and was working with some CEOs, which was a pretty cool experience. So I had like 4 or 5 clients that I would wake up at like 4:30 in the morning with, and I would train them. And so that was kind of the early onset of the training, probably looking into nutrition, although I'm way more advanced in the nutrition probably in my 30s than I was in my 20s. I did eat everything underneath the sun. So that was kind of the early impetus of like health and wellness. Definitely enjoyed that time. I was working a 9 to 5 for a number of years, became an entrepreneur when I was 29. um, but it took a little bit to transition fully into that. So over the past 3 or 4 years is kind of where I've really focused on health, wellness, longevity, in perspective to Full Field and the clinic we own here in Tampa Bay, which is Leslie Functional Health. So it was a culmination. Like you, I've always been in the weight room. I found it early on. It was one of the things where that was like my safe haven. And honestly, it was kind of like I truly believe it was a protectant for me in my high school years, because I devoted so much time and attention to working on my body. So I was absolutely dialed in through high school, lifted in college, but the scene in college was a little bit different. I definitely so instead of going and playing basketball, I played like intramural basketball, but I was lifting like crazy, and so I chose to partake in, the artificials of the world, to bulk up per se.
Yeah.
And so I definitely did that. I was actually at 235 pounds and I was just like a beast. It was just like meat all
Mm.
over me. Not a way as a proponent of longevity now, that wasn't the way then. But I've always really been in the weight room. It's just something that has just like stuck with me. And I honestly, taking you back just a few years, kind of where we are today, about 4 years ago, I started getting into kettlebell and functional training as like kind of an add-on. So I actually really dialed in my cardiovascular health over the past few years from a functional standpoint, to add in the resistance, but to get that functional base. So I actually work out with a bunch of guys in Tampa that do the functional side of things. And then really this past year, my daughter turned 4, and I really believe that when you can get autonomy a little bit in your household, she can swim now. She does a number of things. So I have an 8, 6, and 4-year old, but that 4-year old over the first couple of years was extremely, extremely difficult. And so it was tough for me to get away quite a bit, like from the house, and would devote time to the gym. So I did more class based stuff to maintain activity, where I would do functional training in the kettlebell environment. Did a little bit of CrossFit too, but I've transitioned a little bit more to the bodybuilding side. That's She's gotten autonomy. I can get in the gym a little bit more, and devote time to that. So my goals change every year now. But yeah, I would say, to answer your question, it was very much a staple for me, and it continues to be so. I'm glad this year though, I'm back in, and I'm a little bit more, even more so, dialed into my nutrition, and then how I combine both. I'm very much a cardiovascular guy as well as a muscle building. So I do both, but I do believe, for your viewers out there, with young kids, kettlebell functional training, when you can do stuff at home or you can get a small community together to get hyper focused workouts in. I mean, we were in and out in 45 minutes. It was one of the things that really held me together through that season of before my daughter turned 4, and gave us a little bit more breathing room, I should say.
100%. That's great that you've been able to ebb and flow like that. I think so many people so easily change, quit, give up, put on pause their fitness whenever those kind of changes come and go in their life. And I like how you talk about the changes in your programming as well. I think if you're a normal person, you have seasons in life where it's like this is cool and then this is cool, and then you get to a point where it's usually around mid 30s. That's at least when it happened for me. When you're like, well, I want to be able to combine these two because I know the functional part is important, but I also like lifting heavy weights and I also like being a certain size. Like for instance, I got down to my lowest was probably 179 or 178, and that's when I was doing a lot of functional training, a lot of kettlebell work. Our studio it revolved around functional training, so I would do a lot of classes with our members and stuff, and then of course I'd be coaching them all, and then so I got myself down to 178 or 179, and I just didn't feel. I felt good, but I didn't feel mentally good because I looked at myself and I'm like, man, I'm thin. I didn't expect myself to get to a point where I thought I was too thin. Even though 178 is not small for my frame, I'm only 5'10", so it's not like I'm a, short, too short of a guy. I'm not exactly a giant, but um, so I finally was like, okay, well, I want to put some weight back on. I want to start lifting a little heavier weights again because I enjoy deadlifting and I enjoy squatting, and yeah, bench press is fun too. So I want to be able to do those things at a moderate level. I don't need to do them at the, 500 plus pounds I was doing in college, but I'd like to be able to do them at a good level. So, um, you kind of learn and you adapt and you change things along the way, and you recognize, yeah, I want to be able to move, so I better implement these kettlebell functional exercises, whatever you want to call them, which I totally agree, by the way, about the kettlebell training, because a kettlebell is the most useful, most functional piece of equipment that you can find easily, bar none, because you can literally get 3 kettlebells and do any exercise, any type of training, cardio training with them. You can do resistance, hypertrophy training. You can literally do any type of training with just 3 kettlebells. But at any rate, that's great that you were able to kind of ebb and flow your training, as you changed and learned and adapted.
Yeah, we have so many similarities. That's so funny you say that, because I actually got down to about 177, 178. I'm 6'1", so just a few inches taller, but I got down to that. And people were telling me, like, you're way too skinny. Like you're too thin. And because I always kept a bigger frame. And that was something that I was like, man, I'm ripped, but at the end of the day, I enjoy lifting a little bit heavier weights, pushing myself a little bit more, squatting, and doing all those things. So yeah, those are two big pieces, because that functional piece, which I have a functional trainer, work out with him on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, really early in the morning. Again, it's hyper focused. So we're you're exposing really a zone two, zone three, because we do a lot of cardio in there. So when you add in that kettlebell with the cardio, you're operating in zone two, zone three near the entire time that you're doing that endurance workout. So it's just it's huge for me, because then when I know I go into like a weightlifting scenario, I'm one of those guys that we have our programming where we pretty much dial in the entire body. So it's not circuit based, but we do a lot of supersets within our programming. And so you're bouncing, through pretty much the entire, muscular structure through our programming. But that is like, that combined with nutrition and added all these things. So as people, tell me, I get a lot of people ask me, well, what's the most important? It's tough for me to say, like, it's really all of the things, that are the most important. But like when you're starting out, man, a 20-minute kettlebell exercise with three kettlebells that you're doing 30 swings, 20 kettlebell high pulls, and 20 goblet squats. I guarantee you do 3 rounds of that, you're going to be breathing pretty hard. And then maybe, later on, you add in a quarter of a mile run in between that and come back and do those. You're expanding yourself. You're always operating zone two, zone three, kind of accelerating your VO2 max, and that's one of the most important things as you age, that you want to make sure that you're pushing into those zones where it's not always steady state where you have a solid HRV, because that heart rate variability is what is ultimately exposed when you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so if you can maintain these a lot earlier and have a lot of that variability, and that's what I just love about the functional training piece, is that there's so much variability in it, where I even try to get variability within my strength training component, but they're two separate things. You're really getting lean muscle mass from your strength training, and then you're really exposing your VO2 and getting in different zones when you're in that functional space. So I love them all.
100%. And what you also get through that, which is mobility work. If you're doing proper functional training, then you're getting good quality mobility work as well. Most people don't recognize that. My belief is that good training is mobility, good weight training is mobility training. If you're doing any kind of weight training for that matter properly, then you're also doing mobility training. Mobility meaning you're moving a joint through a proper controlled range of motion. You're able to move a joint through range of motion without it getting out of control and being strong through that range of motion. So, a squat, for instance, many people are scared to squat below parallel because it hurts their knees, or they're scared their knees are going to hurt, or their hips or their back or whatever it is. But what they don't recognize is they should have the capability to do so, but you just haven't done it. So you can do it, and you should be able to squat with your ass essentially on your heels. But most people never go past a seat height. So it's just a matter of training that capability and actually being able to do that. But to go back to the functional training part, which is an area where I just don't think many people appreciate, uh, you get the mobility part with it, but you keep hitting on the zone two part, which I appreciate, because most people think only about cardio in the sense of steady state training, or in the sense of running in general. Even if you're doing it at a zone two level, they think of it in a steady state or a running form. They don't think of using kettlebells or functional training as being a cardiovascular based kind of training apparatus. But I think if you're able to throw that in there, you get to kill two birds with one stone. You get that mobility work, but you also get that cardiovascular piece, which people just don't pay enough attention to. And it's a lot more entertaining than just going out and walking or going out and running.
Oh, for sure, for sure. One thing that came to mind, one of my favorite movements from a kettlebell. Many people struggle with the kettlebell swing, but when you can combo the squat swing into it, where you're swinging and then doing a squat, that's something that I've like kind of added into the repertoire. We do it often now, but that actually has helped me when I go into strength training to get lower, because I was one of those guys, 90s, my knees are pulling, it's a little bit uncomfortable. but I get much lower in my squat now because I did that functional piece with the squat swing or the kettlebell squat swing. So that's been, they're so, they interact with one another. And yeah, that mobility, when you can work out the entire kinetic chain and get those well-rounded motions, those are, I mean, you just become, I wouldn't say everyone's bulletproof. I do get my injuries and my nicks and knacks. But that's where other things come into play. So I'm a big BPC 157 fan. So I microdose BPC 157. And then just recently, something that you were saying, when I was at 170, about 178, there was I didn't routinely get my blood work done. And so I was like, man, I do feel a little foggy and I haven't strength trained in a while. And so I was like, man, I really should get my blood work done. So this is about almost 2 years ago at this point. But I ended up getting my blood work done and found out like my testosterone levels were depleted. And so I was like, man, how does that happen? I'm in great cardiovascular condition. I'm doing, functional training at least 3, 4 times a week. How is this happening? And when I got my blood work done, I was like, man, and this, things that I had to focus on from a nutrition standpoint that I was completely deficient in. And so that's when I did build it up. So the first thing that I did was through supplementation was to get my T levels up. And then kind of the next phase was TRT. So my wife, she put me on the hard cutoff. She's like, no more kids.
No.
I was really pushing for one more, but she's like, nope, we're not having any more kids. So, with that being said, I was like, well, if we are truly done having kids, I'm fine to get on T because disclaimer here, if you get on testosterone, that lowers your sperm count and it's going to make it a lot harder to have kids. So if you're looking that route, it's better to go through supplementation. I would, something that I incorporate into my diet every day is ashwagandha, zinc, magnesium. Those are great add-ons. Then I'm proficient in my sleep. And so anyways, when I was not on T, I was really trying to focus on my supplements to really boost those T levels. And then, have since transitioned to just getting that testosterone so I can boost up my numbers. But point being said is like the blood work speaks, if you're measuring things, and I'm a big guy on data now, I want to know what's going on in my body. But as I get older, being in my late 30s now, I want to recover a lot faster. And I have absolutely seen that with the use of peptides in TRT, where I can recover, I can feel a lot better every day. And so that's been a utilization tool for me, really, just to grow. It's being more curious and more educated about my body. But the more and more we can be educated on, what we can instill as daily disciplines with training, and then ultimately, how can we recover, reduce inflammation in the body? What nutrients? How can we aid our bodies from a fuel standpoint? It just becomes next level.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening who are wondering what BPC 157 is, it's a peptide that helps with recovery essentially, not like exercise training recovery, but injury recovery. So if you literally injure, tear a muscle or hurt a tendon or something to that effect, I don't think are they as useful. I've done it with muscle recovery or with muscle tears before. Have you ever used it on a tendon injury?
I actually have. I sprained my wrist.
Hmm.
So I was an idiot and hopped on a skateboard with my
Oh,
daughter
there you go.
and fell over. And so I did, and it accelerates they call it the Wolverine peptide for a reason because it hyper targets area of inflammation. And I do use it for recovery. So, there's always inflammation going on in the body. And one good thing out of BBC 157, now there's a couple of different ways you can take it. You can take it orally or subcutaneous. I choose to take it subcutaneous just because it's more penetrable. It finds those areas of inflammation in the body. Um, and typically that's done, love handles, glutes, right behind the tries, or right above the tries. And so I use it for just microdosing so that I can kind of maintain that fluidity. But one really good thing that BBC 157 does is it actually is a good maintenance for your gut health. And so guts, it just is uber important, especially as we age, and all the microbiomes and various things that kind of come into our body, ancillary through water, through everything, through what we eat. And so that's why I choose to microdose. So I'll take it 3 times a week, and then I'll cycle off usually every 6 weeks. But I do as a maintenance thing because it's just such a good gut barrier protectant. And obviously, the healthier your gut is, we're learning more and more every day about the gut and the gut microbiome. It really kind of aids in that process of you really being your healthiest.
Yeah, I've read a couple of studies where it's helped with IBS a lot. That's one thing that just screws a lot of people up because, Westernized medicine has no clue what to do with irritable bowel syndrome because it's such a generalized term anyway, so they don't really know what to do with it effectively. But I know that that's been helpful. It's made from juices of the guy. I can't remember something. It's made or derived from something from the gut or juices in the gut or something to that effect. I can't remember exactly, but it's made from something like that. BPC 157, isn't it? Or it's derived
I
from.
believe I believe so, because I
Yeah.
believe we naturally form peptides in
Yeah.
our body. So like we have peptides in there. And mainly, I don't know if it's quite like testosterone where it becomes bioidentical,
Hmm.
because testosterone is, that's from grape leaves or sweet potatoes. So that's bioidentical to the body and it absorbs it similarly. Um, but yeah, peptides in terms of like the sourcing, I do believe they become a little bit more bioidentical, um, into like how they, where they go and then what they're targeting. So it's definitely not something where it's like an artificial source where you're putting it into your body. It's something that's aided, much like a collagen peptide is meant to aid and kind of fuel. The same way with the BPC 157, there's a little bit more precursors and accelerators to that BPC 157, but yeah, I'm just, those are some of the things that I just have in my tool set now that, yeah, I'll tell you what, I feel pretty darn good.
Yeah, peptides are super interesting. My brother-in-law has an HRT clinic, and they do peptides as well. And he's always trialing his, he of course he'll trial peptides on and off. He's a big, he's been in training all his life as well, and he's on a regular dose of testosterone, and he'll try all these peptides, and he'll tell me how these this one helped me I put 7 pounds on. I wasn't even trying to put weight on. And all of a sudden I got this muscle mass after just 3 months. I'm like, well, give me some of that. No, I'm just kidding. But no, they're super interesting. It'll be interesting to see kind of how they play out over the next, couple of years because it's relatively new science. But a lot of it shows, especially with like BPC and there's the other one that's for rejuvenation, TB 500, maybe.
Yep.
That sound
That's
right?
actually probably the one that I was going to mention that maybe he took. So muscle growth with
Mm,
TB 500, and then
mm,
you have CJC 1295 with Ipamorelin is a great one.
mm,
That one acts in maybe a little bit the same derivatives of the BPC, where it's good for gut health, but it kind of aids in sleep recovery. So that peptide really that they blend that actually quite a bit. Those two peptides. Um, and I've actually stacked those and done those. I'll tell you what, I probably should try it again. I didn't see kind of from a recovery standpoint, my sleep, but I sleep pretty good anyway. But those are the CJC 1295 with Ipamorelin is really a good sleep basis, because that's another thing that most people miss out on in thinking in terms of longevity, how much like sleep is actually needed. And so I'm a big proponent of getting adequate sleep and making sure, my mind's sharp every day. So that's one I'll probably try again. But TB 500 is more that like the stacking, that quick muscle building recovery peptide. I've never used that and can't really speak with a tremendous amount of education on that one.
So I want to move to, I'll say time. Most parents, the number one excuse that they say for not taking care of themselves is time. which is, of course, linked directly to their children. So you said you have three kids.
3 kids, 8, 6,
Yep.
and 4. Yep.
Um, how have you been able to keep yourself going with three kids? How have you been able to keep your exercise up? How have you been able to keep your sleep steady? How have you been able to keep your nutrition on track with three kids? You can tackle all three of those, or you can tackle the most important ideas.
Yeah, no, I can tackle all 3. I don't mind tackling all 3 at all because I think it's the biggest thing that people make it as an excuse, and I truly believe, and this isn't to shame anyone, but when you make your kids an excuse, like, that's the worst thing you possibly can do. I truly believe that, like, you're meant to be a model for your kids, and so, at the end of the day, like, what I have to choose is I gotta be their protectant, and but I want to be a model for them. And so, and I'll be honest with you, and my wife wouldn't mind me saying this. She's not on the same nutritional plan that I am. My wife does not look at nutrition. She doesn't look at fuel the way that I do. And so I just lead by myself, and it's a little bit harder in my household. I'm not gonna lie. So like when you don't have a wife that's like as dialed in as you, nor does she really want to be. She's like, I like my food, you know? And so I have to be a little bit more dialed in, but then I also, edge on that side of caution with her. It's not like my wife's like overweight. She definitely keeps herself fit and works out. But at the same time, she does not eat. She would be dialed in if she like dialed in her nutrition. But I'm not a hawk over her. It's her life. She chooses. But I want to be a model for them regardless. And so that's what I choose to do, you know? And so when I dial in my nutrition, it's lean chicken because I don't want to get too many fats. I'm on a really low fat diet right now. And then, through our app, I track everything. So, like, I know what my protein intake, my target every day is 250 grams of protein. I get about 300 grams of carbs. Usually they fall under in my carbs. And then I get about, I usually don't hit my 100 grams of fats. They're usually underneath that. And I'll usually get that through like almond butter. That's where my fats typically come in. So I'll spread some almond butter on some protein waffles in the morning, and I get it a little bit out of the eggs too. So that's been hard, but I also like I made the decision to lead and lead well as a man in my household. And so whether they pick up on it or my wife picks up on it, she knows I'm leading. And so that's one thing that I do from a nutritional standpoint is, yeah, my nutrition does look separately from my family's, and they're okay with it and I'm okay with it. Now I eat with them sometimes, like I eat dinner with them, but I also didn't eat rice in my stew. I was going, I got enough carbohydrates in the kidney beans and the black beans, and then we actually get our meat from a local farm shipped to our house. So that's how I get more of our lean red meats. So, anyways, I will eat with them. There's some things I won't eat and will eat. I usually always get my fibers through strawberries and raspberries, and then I'll supplement fiber too. So fiber is a big thing in my nutrition. But hey, I'm leading. Like that's the one thing. Like there's no excuses. I just lead. And then, the other big thing is then working out, right? And so one of the things is that I had to do, and I mentioned, I feel it for all the guys that have young children and their kids aren't 4 years old yet. Because when my kid turned 4, I'm like, wow, I have a little bit more capacity in life. I didn't realize that. But what did I do in the meantime? Because I knew I didn't have that much. I was running a real estate business, and then I had this like daughter that was like super young and needy, and I'm like trying to figure this out as like a third time dad and with like two other kids that were running all over the place and doing various things. And again, it came down to how am I going to lead? Well, that's when kettlebells came into my world. So about 4 years ago is when kettlebells came into my world. And I started functionally training, but I have a kettlebell at my house. When I had a free 10 minutes, where do you think I was? I was doing some functional training. I could have time to run around the block. I set expectations, but you can either schedule your priorities or prioritize your schedule. And so you get to pick, one of those. And so when you start putting your priorities in your schedule and they're non-negotiables, there's always time for 20 minutes. And usually, what people don't really realize is that the human science of everything, you can work out right after you eat. It actually lowers your glycemic index quite a bit, and you don't get that spike. When you sit down is when you get this rush and then you get all foggy. But if you move after you eat, then you don't get that rush and that fogginess majority of the time. And so one thing that like I've always done is I move, and if I have a gap of 15 minutes, especially for all those people in the, how many people in the United States work from home nowadays, right? So many people, is that it almost becomes like there's no excuse because you can do so much at home. And then with kettlebells, like literally the world is your oyster. Like you can do so much with it, and you can do so much in like 10, 15, 20 minutes. You can get a really good exercise in 20 minutes, but you can even get a good exercise in 10 minutes. But it was a non-negotiable in terms of like the excuse. So like you wouldn't get me watching TV because again, I didn't want to be a model in front of my kids that was okay. I choose to do something else, right? And so they saw me move. Like, my kids are like running around in front of me. We have videos of it, and I'm getting a training session in because I had 10, 15 minutes to move. So those things just became non-negotiables because I prioritized them. And majority of the time, if you cancel out how many times you're on your phone, right? And you're like, no, I'm not going to be on my phone this time. I'm actually going to be doing this. You can add in something that could be that, right? It could be walking more. It could be not even taking a kettlebell, but doing air movements. You know what I mean? The air squats are a phenomenal thing just to get the body rhythm and get yourself out of breath. Doing push-ups, and then that level of compound consistency always produces results. And so I cut out TV. That was one of the main things when the girls were young, cut out completely, pretty much cut out TV. 2 years ago, I actually cut out alcohol. So I went to this past Friday, I had a party with like 300 people, and they had to make multiple alcohol runs. And I'm probably one of the only sober ones there. So I've just incrementally created these disciplines that said, no, these are non-negotiables because I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And when I choose not to do those things, typically better things arise. So like I didn't I didn't drink on that Friday night. So I played basketball that Saturday morning, and it was an easy decision because I didn't drink. I felt pretty good. I can go out and ball. So those are just some of the disciplines, especially when my girls were young, that they were non-negotiables. And the one big things where I say priority, putting your priorities into your calendar, is that for the past 4 years, I on Sunday night, Tuesday night, and Thursday night, I knew I needed to get to bed like probably 9:30 because I had a 5 a.m. kettlebell training. Now we've since transitioned that at 6 a.m. now, but I knew I had to wake up really early to be there by 5 a.m. to get that 45 minutes in. And I truly believe that for anyone with young children, you got to beat your children up because I don't want my children dictating the attitude of my day. It's my day, right? And so usually those what's derived is the mornings, and the mornings are the most controllable times that you have. And so my wife would still be sleeping, I would be out, I would get my training session in, I'd be done by 5:45, now 6:45, still works within our calendar, but I'm done and I'm back at the house taking the kids to school and still helping out. But they didn't dictate my morning, I dictated my morning and how my mornings were going to go. So those are the big things as far as why are you on your phone until 11, 12 o'clock at night? Why are you watching TV until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night? I was darn near going to sleep with my kids. Like they would go to bed at 8. I would probably be 8:30, maybe 9:30 latest, and then waking up. But people don't realize how important mornings are and how much of a controllable the morning is and how much you can get done in a short period of time and how that influences the rest of the day.
I appreciate the things that you eliminated. the things you've taken out over time. A lot of people don't take time to think about letting the brakes off. Instead, everyone's always worried about adding things, right? They live this lifestyle, they drink, they stay up late, they do these things. Now, what do I need to add to start to get in shape? What exercise do I need to start doing? What foods do I need to start adding? Whatever. What are those things that I need to put into my life? Instead of recognizing that until you take the brakes off many times, it doesn't really matter what you add to it. You can exercise every single day, but if you're drinking regularly, you're staying up late, you're eating out 5 days a week, on top of that, your progress is going to be slim to nil. So you have to decide what that looks like to you. What are you willing to take out of your life? I would define my success not necessarily by what I do, but what I don't do, what I choose not to have in my life. And a lot of it is what you've listed. It is not being on my phone regularly, not watching TV, not I mean, screen time in general, is as minimal as I can keep it by still living a functional life, and still growing a business online, being a content person, you understand, you gotta put content out, you gotta put stuff out that requires time on your phone, which is fine, but in that moment, you're using your phone instead of your phone using you, so you have to decide what that looks like to you, and I think taking the brakes off is just a big step that many people overlook.
I couldn't agree more. That's like awesome. Yeah, that is like what are things that you can say no to more often? And man, does that create a discipline like any other? I'll be honest with you, it is one of the hardest things to say no to alcohol when you're around a bunch of drunk people. But it's a really a discipline that if you can, that's a superpower you can create. And I did not realize, I'm like, wow, holy cow, this is an actual superpower of like I can socialize and not want to like pick up a drink. And because at the end of the day, you know what it came down to is this as well, was that when I started macro counting, it went to a whole nother level because I'm like, well, if I drink that, like that takes away from like what I get to eat, and I get to eat like a decent amount. Although you know, what and I found also a hack to eating. It's an amazing thing. I'll rabbit trail real quick because it's amazing. So there's a little bit more sodium intake, but usually if you go to your grocery store, there is Purdue makes them and they're grilled chicken packets. So they're already cut up for you. They're already grilled. There's a little bit of sodium in there, but like I'm not. I love sodium, right? So like you can if you're really trying to get really nice and tight, it's probably not going to be the best thing for you. But if you don't mind the sodium intake with a little bit more water retention, they're great. And so I pick up these things all the time, and then I'll put my greens together, but I'm usually getting like 40, 50 grams of protein like per plate because I got this chicken, and it's the easiest thing to make. Like you can pre-plan your meals like crazy on these things. But one thing that I also took out was I don't do dressings. So typically, I might put some vinegar and some olive oil. So I'll get some fats from the olive oil and then put a little vinegar on that for taste and flavor. I do like some barbecue chicken, so I'll dial up some barbecue chicken every once in a while. But like mainly, if I'm eating a salad, I'll put fruit on there, and it's a great mixture of like putting fruit, and it's almost like you're getting like that in your salad. It's almost like a dressing per se. I was at This is what people don't realize in like macro tracking is that I was watching a guy. He was in front of me. I was actually going to this Mediterranean like restaurant. It was like a Chipotle setup, and he ordered ranch dressing. And I swear to God, I'm pretty sure he put like 1,400 calories of ranch dressing on this like bowl. So he thinks he's eating healthy, but then I was like, "You plan on burning off that 1,400 calories that you're eating the ranch?" I mean, it was only ranch. Like, there's so many fats in ranch, and so like he's just. I mean, they poured on the ranch, and I'm like thinking, and I'm like, that's the exact reason why you look at macros and you don't put on maybe some dressings that you don't plan to burn off, right? Or you don't drink the five or six other drinks because you don't plan to burn those off, right? Like if you plan to burn them off because you're getting 7 calories per carbohydrate in a beer. Those are it's a couple hundred, 100 to 200 calories you're getting in a beer, and you're consuming these. Of course, over time, if you don't plan on burning those off, they're not going to be good for you. And so, anyways, all these things that I've like chose to like kind of take out gave me a lens to like look through a little bit more of like, yeah, I want to take that out because it really doesn't serve me. I can take this out and it's very small, like dressing, and I can add something in, like putting strawberries all over it. I get my fiber from strawberries and it still tastes really good. Like I just had a broccoli salad with about 40 grams of protein and chicken breast, and it was good. Like I mean, I actually enjoy it. Like I enjoy eating, and by working out intentionally, it kind of aids my recovery. But I get to eat a lot more when I'm strength training, so I enjoy that piece of it, of eating a lot more. But I when you add alcohol in, that takes away from food supply. So like if I'm counting calories and I'm tracking those, do I want to have a meal or do I want to have like that beer or a couple of beers or a glass of wine? And so eliminating these things has almost been a game at this point, but it is one of those things that, I genuinely know that it's just promoting, optimal longevity. And that's what I love doing.
No doubt, brother. Matt, man, I appreciate you so much. A lot of good wisdom in there, a lot of good information in this episode. Let me ask you, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on Instagram at human.optimizer. Facebook is typically where I put a lot of content out. I'm just at Matthew Tack on Facebook. And then we have our fitness.fullfuel.com is pretty much our coaching platform where we handle optimal nutrition and muscle building for guys. So that's this has been great. It's been great talking to you and learning about you.
Thanks so much, brother. I appreciate your time. I'll make sure to put all of that in the description as well, so everyone's got links to everything. Uh, Glad to see you're changing so many lives, and like I said, I know you got your hands in a lot of pots. So, you guys got some exciting stuff coming out. I'm pretty excited to hear more. See it grow over the years.
Thanks so much, Jerry. I appreciate it.